Well, good morning, everyone, or good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the States, in the country, in the world. I'm Julian Ryan, Chair of the SIO, the Stories and Organizations, and we are part of the National Story Network. This section is Business of Story, who is going to work his magic as he answers the compelling question, how to captivate your audience with a bewitching brand story. Now, welcome, Park.
Thanks,
And
Jules.
I am going to take a second to ask you a very important question that I can't let any guest go by without answering. And it's the why of your story, how you got into storytelling and what informs your work. And you can share it with me any way you like, of course.
Gotcha. Well, it really started back in the third grade. I started taking piano lessons and I love piano. And I wrote song after song after song after song, not realizing those were all little stories way down the road. I got a degree in music composition and theory, but figuring I wasn't going to make a fortune as a composer, I also got a degree in communications and I've really spent the last 35 years of my life in the branding world. Ran my own ad agency for 20 of those years. I found story big time when our middle child, Parker, went to film school at Chapman University in Orange, California, back in 2006. He graduated in 2010, has been in Hollywood as a virtual reality director and producer ever since. It was that combination of hearkening back to what I learned as a music composer and now being right in the middle of being a message composer that I found in the late 2000s that what we had been doing in advertising, marketing, branding just no longer worked anymore because of the democratization of communications through technology and so forth. And I was desperate to find what was the answer to hack through the noise and hook the hearts of our customers. And it was our son going to film school. I told him, send me your books since I'm paying for them when you're done with them so I can learn what do they teach you. I found the hero's journey. I applied it to business. I was blown away by how powerful it worked. And that set me on my journey now to pivot away from the advertising world. And for the last 5 years, I've done nothing but consult, teach, coach, and speak on the power of story around the world, primarily to leaders of purpose-driven brands. And that's what drives me today. It's that one word of connection. How can I connect two completely diverse worlds into one more powerful world through understanding and empathy that you gain through storytelling?
Well, thank you. That is a compelling answer, and take it away. It's all yours. We're all for listening right now.
Wait a minute, you're not going to fire a bunch of questions at me?
Not yet.
Oh,
We will have them. So we will be allowing questions as we go a little bit later on, but
all right.
Got you right now.
If I could then, do I have control to share my screen? I do. I've just got a few slides here just to give you a little bit more of a background. And I want to show you all this one foundational narrative framework that I found on my journey called the And Button Therefore, that has been unbelievable in my work as a storyteller and helping brands really understand their core story and how to tell it. And I'd love to share that with you. So let me pull this up. And presumably you're seeing that full screen? Mm-hmm. Great. So with the business of story, I teach what I have come to believe is the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling. The applied science is the frameworks that you all probably already use, being in the storytelling network, but using proven frameworks to move communicators from being intuitive storytellers, as we all are as Homo sapiens. It's, innate in who we are. We're intuitive, but we're not necessarily good at it unless we become intentional about it. And that's where the applied science comes in. I have 3 primary frameworks. One of them I'm going to go through at length with you today, and the other 2 we'll talk about in passing. And in doing so, it leads to the bewitchery of story that you all have no doubt experienced when you connect with that audience and you just can feel their vibe and they feel yours, and you bring them together and you move them to action. That's our goal always in storytelling, is to make that connection. But I believe you have to have the applied science. And then about a half a year ago, one of my customers kind of deemed me the most industrious storyteller they've ever been around because of how I use it to build business. So I grabbed that moniker. I love it. And now, kind of tongue in cheek, I call myself the world's most industrious storyteller through, for business and leadership. And as I mentioned, it started with me and the hero's journey, and then mapping it to business. While I knew the hero's journey itself was probably too woo-woo and too literature-oriented for most business minds, I mapped it to these 10 steps that I call the story cycle system. And in it, it takes a brand on the hero's journey in a more succinct way, but in their terms. So I use this first and foremost as a brand strategy crafting platform, only to find that it also works really well in business leadership presentations and coaching and so forth. This is where I started. And it wasn't until I started doing more digging and researching this that I found some other smaller frameworks that work with inside this. And that's the one I want to tell you about and show you today. What I try to explain to my business clients, quite often I'll have them there with their arms crossed, looking at me cross-eyed, like thinking that storytelling is a gimmick or it's a BS. And what I explain to them is that our minds, our brain, that essential organ sitting atop our spinal column, makes up 2% of the mass of our body, yet it consumes 20% of our calories or energy. It is constantly whirring in the background, fight or flight. What do I do next? It is constantly telling ourselves stories, fiction, nonfiction, to try to determine what we're going to do next. When we bombard it with nothing but numbers, and by the way, this is the only time you're going to see numbers in my presentation, numbers, out of context, it doesn't know what in the world to do with it. It is not programmed to calculate numbers unless we place them in the context of a story. And as you all know, stories elicit and create images in the theater of our minds that helps create meaning out of the madness of being world and makes us unbelievably memorable in the process because we're engaging the limbic system and emotion, and that's what we're always looking for. So as I mentioned, I've been in the advertising branding world for a long time, and working with brands is easy when they own the influence of mass media. We had TV, radio, print, outdoor, direct mail, public relations, events, and no Yelp. So that's when, after 25 years of my career and 10 years of running my own ad agency, I realized it just wasn't working anymore because the masses had become the media. They took over technology, and as you all know now, we're all dealing with it. We can all be our own TV, print, radio stations, direct mail authors, 24/7 with global reach from the quiet and privacy of our own kitchen table. But unfortunately, what this has created is this massive amount of communication that just skips off our heads. We just don't connect with it because most of it is not placed in the context of a story. So while our cerebral cortex has been so brilliant in creating this technology that has been growing at the compounded rate of Moore's law, which is growing all of our communication at that same rate, you and I and all of our customers out there are still walking around with our monkey storytelling brain. Our limbic system, the exact same system that our ancestors used to navigate and survive the savannah 90,000 years ago, is the exact same system you and I use to navigate and survive the internet. The bombardment of communication. I believe that it's become a communicable disease, communication. It's like ADD because all of us are adding to it. And yet I found that an anecdote is the antidote to help us cut through. And one of the most simplest ways I found, and this was after I had crafted my story cycle system, was this ABT, the and, but, and therefore. And it's based on problem solution dynamic that we have been using since the beginning of time as Homo sapiens to survive our surroundings, essentially. It's still so hardwired into it that our subconscious is constantly looking for this problem solution dynamic. And if we don't deliver it quickly, we lose our audiences. Not that they intentionally wander off, but their subconscious, their limbic system wanders off like, what's in it for me? What in the heck's going on? So here's how this basic ABT and button therefore build works. And I have used it now extensively in branding just to help a brand find its core truth. You first start, and this, by the way, can be a 1-sentence, 2-sentence, or 3-sentence paragraph using the setup, problem, resolution, dynamic, or Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 structure of story. You start with a context. This is called the statement of agreement. Start with a context, and then you want to raise the stakes. You want to increase its importance. But you insert the problem. But here's the problem we're solving for. But here's why they can't have that. But here's what's happening in the world. And then you come up with your therefore. And here's the solution. Therefore, today I'm going to show you what we're going to do next. Therefore, I'm going to demonstrate how we can be of service to you. It's super powerful. In fact, I used it on you at the very beginning of this. I've been in the branding and advertising marketing world for 35 years. I'm just setting the context. I got a lot of experience in this. Mm-hmm. And I've helped lots of purpose-driven brands grow through the influence of mass media. That's the stakes. But technology leveled the playing field, and now the masses are the media, and it's nearly impossible to connect in the world. Therefore, I crafted the story cycle system to reach back into our primal power of what drives us as human beings to understand. And that's what I coach and teach today and help brands find their place in the world. Now, I learned this process through a really interesting character, a guy by the name of Dr. Randy Olson, Harvard PhD evolutionary biologist. He gives up tenure after 20 years, goes to USC Film School, graduates, produces 3 documentaries on climate change and global warming, and more importantly, has written 4 books teaching scientists how to use story to communicate their big thinking. And in fact, Randy and I, since COVID has kicked off, we have been doing the online sessions with scientists, with 2 different groups of scientists, and now with the Fish and Wildlife Service. They're 10 sessions, they're 10 one-hour sessions that we do nothing but teach the and button therefore and how they can use it in everything from grant writing to communicating their findings to just becoming more compelling communicators as scientists. Well, when I found this in his second book called Connection, I was blown away, and I immediately saw the implications for branding, how this could be one of the simplest ways to get to the core truth of a brand and how you can use it everywhere. In fact, in this Instagram post, by the way, I've got a podcast, and it will be 5 years old coming up July 1st with over 200, well, almost 260 episodes. I've had Randy on 4 times with he and I doing nothing but exploring the ABT in the world. And this is show number 199 that you can listen to our most recent conversation on it. But here you can see it in action. Most executives communicate and care, but bore. Therefore, use the universal narrative structure of the ABT to excel through the stories you tell. I've even shortened that now and say most executives communicate and care, but bore. Therefore, tell a story. You know, it's just that simple. Now, when I first saw this, I thought it was too simple. I thought it couldn't possibly work. And so I started doing some research and looking, where the heck else has the ABT showed up in our life? Well, every fairy tale, for the most part, is set up in an ABT structure. Look at little Miss Muffet, who sat on a tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Along came a spider, sat down beside her, and frightened Miss Muffet away. So can you see where the ABT, where the and button, therefore, plugs into this narrative construct of agreement with the and, but here's the conflict or the contradiction. Therefore, here's the consequence or the resolution. Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, and she was eating her curds and whey. But along came a spider who sat down beside her. Therefore, it frightened little Miss Muffet away. You look at any nursery rhyme, it is basically set up in this exact same narrative structure format. Where else have you seen it? Well, I started doing some more digging, and by golly, the Gettysburg Address is a perfect and button therefore. 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, if Lincoln were a poor storyteller and a typical business person, he would have gone on of and this and that and would have just taken his audience into oblivion. They would have been checking out. He uses it once, statement of agreement, and then he inserts the contradiction. But now we're engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. He has now hooked the limbic system because he's got a question in there. Here's our ordinary world set up, But now here's the problem we're solving for. Limbic system says, oh my God, what are we going to do about it? Therefore, we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, so on and so forth, and he delivers. Why, or to demonstrate how powerful this is, I didn't know this at the time, but when I looked in the Gettysburg, Lincoln wasn't even the keynote speaker that day. A gentleman spoke before him named Edward Everett. He was a former Secretary of State, a self-proclaimed orator. Edward Everett spoke for 2 hours, and nobody knows who he was. Lincoln spoke for exactly 2 minutes, and it's one of the most legendary, iconic addresses delivered by any leader ever. And there is story dynamic right there. Simple, concise, compelling, and you can see, the historical significance of it. As I'm rounding this out, you see this everywhere. Go to the New York Times, look at the front page. When you look at read their articles, you'll find a minimum of 3 of them set up in the ABT. Quite often 6 or 7 of them will be set up in that. They don't know it, but they're just intuitively good storytellers. That's why I say I try to get business leaders to go from being intuitive storytellers to intentional storytellers, using the applied science of storytelling. The and button, therefore, is one of the elements of the applied science. Where else you see it? Pop culture. Carly Rae Jepsen. Any Carly Rae Jepsen fans out there? This video, Call Me Maybe, has over 1 billion views on YouTube. And is it because they have the ABT in the chorus? Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe. So and therefore are always, interchanged. It's more of a colloquial way of saying it. But you see it everywhere. South Park has been around, a crazy TV show, forever because Matt Stone and Trey Parker have one rule they follow in scripting. It's called the rule of replacement. Whenever they come across an and in their script, excuse me, they ask themselves, can we replace it with a but or therefore? Pardon me. Can we replace an and with a but or therefore, because it keeps propelling the story forward by creating tension and mystery and asking what happens next. That's probably why they've been around for about 20 years. So that's what it looks like. This is the and button, therefore build. Context and raise the stakes. Here's our ordinary world. But as Joseph Campbell say, you're getting launched into your upside down or extraordinary world because there's a call to action. Something is happening that you have to come to grips with, you have to tackle, you have to take care of. And then the therefore is the resolution. Here's how I'm going to help you do that. So I know I covered a lot. It's very quick. As you know, I've got a new book out that covers my entire process of the story cycle system and how to use it in presentation building, brand storytelling, business leadership storytelling. I have numerous case stories throughout it that demonstrate it in action. I have examples of the and, but, therefore. I also have examples of the 5 primal elements of story that I use that takes the ABT and expands it now into a short anecdote for really big power. These are a lot of the frameworks that I know that you are all familiar with. You must be if you're a part of this network group. I have just changed them and worked with them to work very effectively inside the leadership world and the business branding world. And that's what I do today. And I couldn't be more tickled to be doing it. Being in the storytelling world is just so rewarding that I also get to hang out with cool people like you in a session like this. So thank you. Any questions? I threw a lot at you. I tried to get through it because I knew we had a limited amount of time.
I have a question, then I'm going to unmute the phone. Is there a particular case that may not even be in your book about that, something that changed your way of thinking that you can use as an example when you tested the ABT version? Yeah. Like it was your launch site and you went, this will work.
You know, when I read it in Randy's second book called Connection, it hit me right there. I wasn't even using it, but I have been so embroiled in branding and communication. There we go.
What happened there? Okay.
I keep getting muted. There we go.
Okay.
Won't touch it. It was really that moment when I first read that book, and then I started going out and teaching it, and I had to learn it myself how to do it. One of the most profound moments after that came when I was speaking at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego. I've been there for the last 5 years, and I do one of the kickoff sessions for the 4-day conference all around storytelling. And in the room, this was about 4 years ago, I had 600 people and going through this. And I asked some of them, who's got an ABT after I taught them the structure to get up. And this one poor guy got up, sort of a middle-aged guy. He had been in the recording studio business and in radio sales, and he was trying to launch a digital ad agency. And he got up to read this ABT, and it just didn't work. I mean, he just had the whole room kind of looking at him like, what? I don't know what he's talking about. And what it demonstrated to me, and I told him, is I said, you're really unclear on what you're trying to do personally. You need to clarify that. And it's demonstrated now in your ABT because you can't get it dialed in. So just go start doing some more soul searching, keep crafting it, and it will help you get clear in your own mind what that is. So then I'm sitting there on stage and I'm thinking, oh my God, am I not going to get a good one to demonstrate this to the crowd? Because then all of a sudden the crowd kind of looked at me like, all right, so what next? And this one lady at the far side of the room, I don't even know how I picked her hand. All these hands go up when I asked if there's another one that would like to share, and it fires up. So I pick her way over here. She gets up, she goes to the mic, and she says something to the effect of, parents are looking for alternatives to education, and more of them are moving to homeschooling, but they feel alone and isolated. Therefore, I've created the Homeschooling Association to bring these parents together so that they can learn from each other to grow their kids. And I mean, she nailed it. And the whole crowd knew it immediately. They erupted in applause. They immediately got it. And I was standing on stage going, number one, whew, good example of it. But number two, oh my God, what an example of this in action. And remember, this was a crowd that had just learned it not 10 minutes, 15 minutes before. So they were still processing it until they experienced it. And then once they experienced it, their limbic system lit up, goes, God, I understand. Beautiful. Totally get it. Thank you. Yeah.
It's the power of sometimes the right question at the right time to the audience and the participants teach us. I'm going to unmute everybody and also ask, there's one or two compelling questions in the chat, which I know you haven't had a chance to see. So
no, I haven't.
Ask them to ask themselves, and starting with Ati. Can you do that?
Thank you. First of all, awesome presentation. Thank you so much. I'm already following you on Twitter.
Thank you.
I'm really excited. I look forward to getting into those podcasts as well. Thank you for your work. And my comments, I said, awesome. Your comments about Lincoln reminded me of Gladwell's Tipping Point. And remember, he starts out with that story about Paul Revere and George Dawes. Which one do you remember? And so if you can shed a little more light on the concept of stickiness and how you use it in your work, I'd be most interested.
Yeah, stickiness is always that kind of hard thing to get your hands on. It's like making something go viral, which is like impossible. You've got to have a lot of luck in there. I have found with these frameworks, it becomes more sticky because it makes the author, it makes the communicator, first and foremost, think in story and communicate about a real world event about a real person, a singular individual that went through something that your audience can empathize with and feel and live vicariously through to then get to that point, that sticking point. What makes it sticky, I believe, is how well you talk about that moment in time for that individual in the story of what changed in their life to create a new resolution or a new realization about something. I think stickiness comes down to how well a very short story can be told using this basic setup of setup, problem, resolution. I think, to me, whenever anyone comes back to me, and in my book, I have a lot of these different stories when people come back to me and share one, they will always talk about a point in time or that person, Jennifer, I talked about, and they're able to pull out those specifics. And I think it's the specifics of that telling in a narrative framework that makes a story sticky or makes it more potentially sticky. If we're just bombarding people with opinions and assertions and stats and facts and features and functions, no stickiness whatsoever. Put that in a context of a story, it's hugely powerful.
Thank you so much.
Carol, you had a very good question. Where are you, Carol? There you are. Okay, you in the palm trees. Yes.
Hi, Carol.
Yes, because of your background in Music Park, I'm wondering why you're not putting music in your slides. You've got color, you've got pictures. Music is so emotional. I mean, you really lead people through music.
I do. I just don't do it often on Zoom. So great question, Carol. I did this thing that worked so well. I'm not patting myself on my back. It was an aha moment. But to your point, I'm like, I'm in the music biz. Why don't I use music? So when I do half-day sessions, I will take audiences through my story cycle system, and I'll actually have them craft a story. So one day I'm standing in Chicago and I've got a room full of about 200 financial planners walking through this. And I'm saying, okay, we're going to take 1 minute and I want you to write your backstory. What's the ABT for your story to set that up? And so ready, go. And I'm standing on stage and the room's kind of murmuring, looking around, and you hear that rumble of people working, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, time's up. Let's move on to the next one. And I'm going to myself, I'm thinking, this is so awkward and it's got to be annoying to my audience. So what I did is I came home, and our youngest son is in the music business. And I asked him, I said, I need a music track for each one of these 10 steps, just like you were scoring a movie. And each one has a track that's appropriate to the hero and the disruption that's happening and so forth. And I created little 1 minute soundtracks out of that, and that became my timer. So then I would say, all right, let's go. Step number 1, write your backstory. You have 1 minute. When the music's over, we're moving on to the next one. And it became this wonderful little soundtrack that took them through the whole workshop at that point, you know, what they were doing there. And people even started to react saying, wow, I've never actually ever written anything to a soundtrack before. And it made all the difference in the world. It was so cool.
I've had a storytelling business for 40 years, and you've told me today why parables and fables are so important, and that they're repeatable, and that when I do a business audience, I really need to get out of that mindset that storytelling is for children. It is so powerful. All leaders need to be using it.
Oh, yeah.
To circumvent the judgment part of it.
Yeah. It's the absolute. I have a guy, he's Irish in Dublin. I had him on my show. His name's Sandy Dunlop, and he was on a few months ago, and really a fascinating guy talking about mythology and how brands and businesses and leaders can really lean on mythology to make sense out of what's happening around them at the time. And I'm going to record him tomorrow for a special session. He's put together an episode, especially for me, on the mythology of a pandemic, since we're all going through this. And what have we seen in the past in mythology and parables around pandemics that help us make meaning out of what we're all going through today? And how can business leaders use those? He's got 7 tips. I don't even know what they are. I'm going to learn them tomorrow in the recording about how to use mythology in your world based off, you know, the backdrop of the pandemic we're all experiencing to help boost your leadership and morale of people and so forth. And that show will be on a week from Monday. So it'll play right to what you're talking about.
You know Sam Horn, because she has a similar message. She's written quite a few books.
No, I don't.
Yes, and her whole thing is infobesity, you know, and that you need to ask a question when you're introducing yourself, like you're networking to a group. You ask them a question to hook them, and then you have this real world problem, and you give a solution. Instead of explaining what your business is, they all come up after you. And she for years wore a hat. She doesn't now. But so the woman in the hat, you know, but she uses Sam Horn, yes. And her background is she used to chair the Maui Writers Conference. But her books are fantastic because they're humorous and they're so digestible. And she's very, very popular speaker, and she travels all the time. But now she's landed in Boulder, out in the mountains. And but she's really a wise, as well as clever person. The way she crafts words, they're so memorable.
Sounds like she would make
one of her books is Tung Fu, you know. And she
Wait a minute.
Take the Bully by the Horns is another one. And she's she'd be great for your podcast.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, thank you for that. I'll definitely track her down.
So who else have we heard from? Rupa? Oh, yes. Unmute yourself there. You self-muted there.
Hi, Rupa.
Yeah, I come from a different world. I'm a volunteer storyteller at the Asian Art Museum, and we do stories for school groups. But I've noticed that, keep it simple and short and interactive, and that works the best. You have to make that connection. And I guess that pretty much applies to adult audiences as well, right? Because you don't, if you go beyond, 10, 15 minutes and it's not compelling, you can actually see people starting to kind of fade out. What do you suggest? I'm trying to make the transition from telling stories from mythology and all that to school groups, to doing like personal stories, immigrant stories, because I moved here about 40 years ago. So I was wondering if you have any tips of how to make stories compelling, and especially stories from a different voice like mine,
Mm-hmm.
How do I appeal to like mainstream audiences?
Yeah, number one, I love your voice. And I think it actually brings a magic to your words and your storytelling. So I think number one, that is like a huge benefit for you. Number two, here's a little exercise that I do and I have my customers do. Rupa, what I'd like you to do is think of 9 one-word descriptors that describe who you are or your offering. I basically break them down to these 3 things. I want you to find 3 one-word descriptors that describe you as the brand. Then I want you to find 3 one-word descriptors that describe how you do storytelling or communicate. What is your offering? Then I want you to find 3 one-word descriptors that describe your outcomes. When you're telling your stories, your audience and so forth, what do they get? What do they leave with? Do some soul searching, find those 9 words, and then go and find a true story, real story that you have experienced or someone has experienced through your storytelling that celebrates each one of those words. You're going to end up with 9 stories, 1 story per word. That word becomes the theme, and that's going to trigger you to go do some story archaeology to find a story that supports that theme. In that story, see if you can tell that story in under 2 minutes. Again, you can set it up using the and button. Therefore, you set the stage, but here's the problem. Here's what was going down. And then you insert in that but problem. Here's the action that took place and the surprise outcome that came from that action. And then the therefore in this case, or the moral of the story, is that learning, that aha moment that comes of it. When you do this, I find that it helps you not only find stories, but it helps you really focus your stories. And the greater conflict and contrast you can get from that and statement of agreement of setting the stage to the but problem, that what happened next, the more you will hook your audience and they will be ready for your therefore answer. You do that, you can then have 9 stories that are under 3 minutes. Set them up with an ABT, boom, launch into your story and see how your audience reacts. And 2 things I found, Rupa, in the branding world comes out of this. Not only do you get tremendous content for you to be able to go and share, but for you as the storyteller, it helps you get focused on who you are, what you're about. And it's not that you're not focused on that, but maybe you just haven't clearly articulated that. By finding these stories, your own story will begin to reveal itself in how you tell it. And all of a sudden your brand will start coming to life. That's the way that I found this transition into something you're doing into something you want to transform or do into something else works the best. It's not as easy as filling out a form and just like, oh, now I'm doing this.
Yes.
It's that soul searching and the stories that come from that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I call that the OO exercise, by the way. OOO, organization. That would be you in this case. 3 words that describe the organization. The second O is the offering. So 3 words that describe that offering. And then the third one is outcome. I call that the OO exercise. It is in chapter 7 or the 7th step of the story cycle system.
Okay, great.
So Park, two things. You're getting great feedback in the chat about your feedback. And also, Priyanka, I want to check if you got the answer you liked from what Park's been just saying. Where is your comment? How can ABT be effective when working senior leadership in helping them build the organizational story and mission and vision? Are you looking to hear more than what Park's been sharing in these last few minutes?
Julian, thank you so much for providing the space to ask me the question. And namaste from India, Park.
Namaste.
It's a beautiful presentation that you are giving. So my question is a little long. If I can take 1.5 minutes to ask just the question.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I work with the senior leadership and the middle level with the corporates, and I help build their mission vision and how they can, communicate it better to the external stakeholders as well as the internal stakeholders. So sometimes it becomes top down. So they decide and then it percolates to the all the layers. And sometimes they discuss with the employees, and then whatever is the outcome, based on that, they build up the rebrand themselves in a way. So my company name is Wild Strawberry, and I will take just 1 minute to tell that particular story and ask you whether it actually fits in the ABT model or not.
Okay.
So I used to be in corporate, and then when I used to live in the West, at that particular time, just under my house, like 2-storied building, under my house, there used to be a wild strawberry bush. And I didn't know that. My friends knew that, but I didn't know. So one day my friend Tom came and, he asked me, Priyanka, have you noticed the wild strawberry bush over there? And strawberry happens to be my favorite fruit. I didn't know, but people around me knew what is there under my house. And I immediately remembered the masked deer from India, which has the mask, the fragrant mask in its navel. And the deer keeps running in the valley, looking for the fragrance, where from it is coming. It runs up the cliff, it runs everywhere. And one day it jumps from the cliff and it dies, or it gets poached by the hunter. And I just remembered that story of the masked deer and how the mask is right there in the navel, and how the wild strawberry bush is right there under our house, without we knowing that whatever we are looking till the end of our life is right there within us, looking for exploration. So that's how I built the Wild Strawberry Exploration, the art way, where we are trying to help people doing self-exploration, exploration of others, using storytelling, drama, and arts. So my question is, it's a long story and I took a lot of time. My question is it following ABT model or not?
It's not quite, but you can easily do it. So what I heard was just a series of events. And it came to, so I kind of heard the and model. What I would like you to do is accentuate the story turns, but I didn't know that it was underneath there, but it had been there for X number of years and I didn't know that. Therefore I went. And then, and as you're telling a longer story, you can then also offer up another but there, and found the strawberry bush, but da-da-da-da-da. So what I would ask you to do is, I think there's an ABT structure in that story. I would like you to get out of telling it as a series of events, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, therefore this happened, and see if you can't ratchet up the conflict more by literally physically putting a but in there in 1, 2, or 3 places, followed by a therefore. Does that make sense?
That's beautiful, Park, and it makes a lot of sense, because physically I can see I am standing, putting my fist out to the audience and saying, but.
Yes. Now, here's the other thing, too. Some of you might be thinking, as so many people do, that it seems too staid. It seems too obvious. If I sit up there and go, and, but, therefore, they know what I'm doing? And the answer is no, they have no idea. They just simply don't know. And at first, I always recommend do it. And the and always works. But always works. But you can say, however. Yet you can use something else, but all I'm trying to do is to get you to think in this problem solution dynamic. And picture it this way. I say you've got a sailing ship, a storytelling sailing ship, and it's foggy in the harbor, and your job is to land it at that dock. Use the and buoy to help guide you into the harbor. Use the but buoy to tell you where to turn to miss the rocks, and then use the therefore buoy that is at the head of the dock so that you can land your sailing ship story. I use them simply as narrative buoys at first, and I use them over and over. And when I'm writing, even to this day, I will put a big and, but, therefore, and then I will fill in the blanks. What am I trying to say here? Because if I don't, I will default back to blah, 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 and, because that's the easiest thing to do. What you got to do is think in this ABT that makes it easier, but sometimes it's difficult to get that down. And the reason being is it makes it really easy for your audience to digest what you're trying to say. Remember when where I said the brain takes up 2% of your body mass, but consumes 20% of your energy? Dr. Randy Olson, evolutionary biologist, has trained me. Our brains are lazy. They don't want to work. They want to stay in efficient survival mode at all time. If we're confusing them in our communication, or we're telling them and stories, the brain shuts off. It's like, oh, I can't take this. Get to your point already. You know, I mean, how many times have you said that to yourself? The ABT makes you get to your point before you even present. Mm-hmm. Then you can easily hand deliver that point to your audience, and they just sit there and they just go, thank you. Now they're wide open for whatever you want to tell them, because they've opened themselves up to say, they're making it easy on me. That's what the ABT does for you.
And what I like today was, it's a great example of the fact, and no matter what we do, that Priyanka took a brave stance to raise her voice, try something in a public forum, and then with you having some feedback so she can go back and try again. So it's all about learning and do-overs and trying again. So
I love that, Priyanka. Yeah, thank you for that. One other thing, since you're in the corporate consulting business, here's something else. I call the ABT your storytelling dumbbell, your weight. And I say, use it everywhere. Use it in your emails. Use it in all of your messaging. Use it with your friends and family at home. Just keep practicing it, and you'll build your narrative intuition. Here's how powerful it is from a consulting side. We've all sat across from a client or a prospect, and they've just done this, verbal vomit on us of a problem they have at hand. And they may go on for 10 minutes because they're so passionate about it. And they're kind of all over the place sharing with you all their problems. You sit there and you take your copious notes and you keep sifting it through an ABT. When they're done, then you just repeat back to them, well, here's what I heard you say. And you deliver that 10-minute rant in a 20-second ABT. And it is bewitchery. They will look at you and they'll go, oh my gosh, you said that better than I said it. Mm-hmm. And it demonstrates a couple things. You were listening, which in this day and age is so hard to get people to listen to.
For sure.
It clarifies what the exact problem is. And then sometimes I've had this happen too. They're going, oh my God, yeah, you've got it there, except I now realize I forgot to tell you one thing. So then they tell you that one thing that gets you even more focused on what the real problem is at hand. And then when you're working with your clients in a big brand, big company era, where they are trying to tell a story of change and like it's its own brand to get people involved, you use the ABT to set the platform. We used to do this and it worked really well because of this, but now this has changed. Therefore, we're launching into this. And if the single most powerful thing it will deliver for you and your clients is utter clarity on the problem you're solving for on their behalf, which then makes the communication.
Wait, you hit your mute there. You got very animated there, Park. Okay.
Which
all right. Well, I have to interrupt you and say, this has been a great experience. I know I'm going to take a chance. I speak for everybody to say we wish you could be speaking at more time together, but we have to leave with the learnings.
Therefore,
we're going to be applying this next week when we meet a client or two that we are going to be chatting with. So we're going to do it in real time, giving you feedback. Now, where can we find you?
All right. The best place is just businessofstory.com. That's the place you can track me down. I'm on LinkedIn, of course, just Park Howell. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, as one of you have already found. And I've got a Facebook group, a private Business of Story Facebook group, if you're interested in joining. It's storytelling for purpose-driven leaders. And we've got, I don't know, 1,200 members in that. And we share resources all the time, and people, chat back and forth. And of course, brand Bewitchery. It's on Amazon, and everything I've learned in my 35 years of branding and how I've applied it in the story in the world now is in that book.
Well, I'm going to totally be listening to your podcast. I'm married to a Dubliner, so I cannot miss that one on
They're pretty good storytellers.
Yes, absolutely. So for all of you out there, make sure you join us next month on July 23rd when we're going to have Kendall Haven, and he'll be talking about how we apply the science of story to the art of communications. Now, I'm going to put a plug in for the wonderful people who did the National Story Virtual Conference, Connected. They have put a survey in our inbox. So these folks lived in little Zoom boxes for 12 days, talking to us 24/7. Answer your survey, answer the question, so we can figure out what we're doing next year and how we can continue to build on all our experiences. And they did a fantastic job of bringing the whole planet together for different types of stories over the course, like I said, of 12 days. It was amazing. And so do that so I can make good brownie points with the organizers. And reach out to us about ideas, about presenters, about things you'd like to do. I know our SIO is going to be pulling together some stories about what we learned during COVID, and how we can apply it to our work, whether it's personal stories, whether it's things we had to shift and change about our work. But let's share those learnings and keep working together. And you've gotten big thank yous in the chats. Thank you, Park. You're a masterful trainer and wonderful. Okay.
By the way, I'll give a plug for Kendall Haven. He is marvelous. So I had him on my show a few years ago. Brilliant guy. That is going to be a terrific session.
Yes. So we're all connected one way through story. So this is great. All right, everyone, listen, be safe, be well, and keep showing up. This is incredible. And as you know, the story sessions are recorded, and they're going to be available online for you to refer and review the sessions you liked. So take care and be well. Cheers. Thank you again.